I'm going to call Jen Logie.
So I would like to just start my contribution on this section referencing some of the comments I heard made this week in the homelessness inquiry, because it is quite relevant to this part of the bill. So start with the comment from Shamabel Jacob, talking about home ownership died in 1991 and renting sucks. The housing market is fundamentally broken. And Housing New Zealand hasn't built enough homes. I think that pretty much sums up the drive for this part of the bill. It's actually taking some sound economic advice and using that as an input to drive good public policy making. I would also like to just go back to the context of this part of the bill sitting within this piece of legislation and reference back to the first piece of state or special housing accord legislation that also went through under urgency 3 years ago. And we were told that this whole model that the government's providing us is to bring about affordable housing and increase the number of houses that were being built. And what we heard at that time was that this was necessary to be done under urgency because it showed the government cared, and that it needed to happen because if you looked at Auckland at that time, in 2013, the average house price was about $735,000. And God forbid, there was an expectation or a possibility that the average house price might rise to $1 million within 3 to 4 years. So this legislation was needed under urgency to prevent that possibility. Well, how ironic is it that on the same day that house prices in Auckland exceeded $1 million, the government is coming back with the same legislation to extend that same provision that has so comprehensively failed. So I am very pleased to be supporting part 3 of this bill that actually has some hope of succeeding, some hope of actually delivering New Zealanders affordable housing and getting those houses built. As Shamabel Jacob was saying, Housing New Zealand hasn't built enough homes, so actually we know what part of the solution is, and it is for Housing New Zealand to build more homes. And Mr. Seymour can quibble over the details of who's going to be there with the hammer. Actually, nobody's ever thought that we're going to be sending Nick Smith out with a hammer. That is not what Mr. Twyford is suggesting with this bill, though actually it would be more constructive than what he's doing here. But this is actually taking responsibility, and I do think this conversation is really important. And if I'm honest, and I'm not speaking for anyone else in my party, when the arguments are coming up about how we've complained that there isn't enough information for us to make our decisions on the previous parts, and yet we're presenting this without people having the possibility of consulting, I personally don't have faith that the government is going to pass this and allow it to pass. But I am absolutely committed to reflecting the views we heard from the homelessness inquiry and giving New Zealand the chance to consider the alternative, to consider that actually, yes, this could be possible, that we could have some responsible public policy intervention in housing. And I do want to speak to another aspect of this part briefly around the ability for these homes to be safe and warm and dry. And that also is one of the problems we have with the free market approach that the government is using with the State Housing Accord, as opposed to this more direct model, whereas actually we can ensure that all of those houses are warm and dry as well as affordable, giving people, improving people's health, improving their quality of life, and providing returns to the government in terms of educational improvements, better work productivity, savings to the health budgets, all round.
So ko Andrew Little.